Welcome to Church Planting and Renewal Conversations. I'm Chris Vogel, Director of Next Gen Pastors, and I serve M&A as the Ecosystem Development Director. We all know that certain items do not mix well together. Hence, we might say of two people that don't get along, they're like oil and water. They just don't get along well. There are others that some of those ideas I learned at an early age, that one should not drink orange juice after brushing teeth, or that no matter how well bleach and vinegar are good cleaning agents, if you mix them together, you get chlorine gas, and that will do a number on your lungs. There's another thing that I have found, that it does not often mix well together: pastors and money. Now, I'm not just talking about those pastors who mix ministry and money to get private jets and mansions. What I'm talking about are those of us who are better trained with words than numbers, who would rather spend an afternoon with people than a spreadsheet. Well, this doesn't just imply or deal with those aspects of finances, but it's a lot of the administrative aspects that go into pastoring. And oftentimes, it's especially true of church planters. Trouble is, no ministry will survive without both. While we may be committed to a ministry of word and sacraments, what happens behind the scenes in the church office is what permits us to be about the task that's before us. Well, I'm pleased to have with us today Keith Moore. Keith is the senior partner at Auxilio Partners, who after 30 years as a small business entrepreneur, felt called to put his business knowledge and experience to work for nonprofits and churches. Auxilio develops and manages comprehensive cloud-based back office solutions so that pastors and nonprofit leaders could focus on their call to take the gospel in word and deed to communities. Also with us, a partner with Auxilio, is Kara Callahan. Kara was the Chief of Staff for Grace Downtown in Washington, D.C., and Director of Operations for Radstock Ministries. She has 18 years or more experience managing nonprofits. Kara brings a broad range of skills and a heart to serve new churches and those wanting to grow their mission. Steve Stanton. Steve is a church planter in Colorado Springs at Waypoint Church. They began the work right before COVID, but launched worship just 5 months ago. Chris Talley is at work planting Lakeway Church in Morristown, Tennessee, outside of Knoxville. Chris has served in churches in Orlando, Knoxville, and Atlanta before being recruited by the Tennessee Valley Presbytery to plant in Morristown. And also we've got Michael Novak. He's a planter and pastor at Trinity Grace in San Antonio, Texas. Before that, he was the RUF campus minister at Trinity University there in San Antonio for 7 years. Well, before we jump in, let me start off by saying this is meant to be a conversation. We invite you to ask questions. Use the chat box or the Q&A feature on Zoom. If you're watching on Facebook, it's often a challenge for us to track those questions. We'll do our best, but throw us any questions because we really do want this to be a conversation. So Keith, tell us what is Auxilio, a little bit of the history and the background, and what do you and Kara, what do you guys offer?
Thanks, Chris. Well, Auxilio actually came out of a calling that my wife and I felt after our last child left for college, and we started looking at what was the next season, and really felt a sense of God saying, take your small business entrepreneurial skills and put it to use for churches and nonprofits who tend to be, stronger on vision perhaps than they are on administration and business. So for the first few years, I actually ended up involved in a number of enterprise-wide software projects. But then in 2014, at that time we were living in Baltimore in my home church. The bookkeeper left, and the director of operations said to me, "Hey, would you take a look at our back office and see if there's something you can do with it?" And that really was sort of the first foray into realizing at that time that we could actually build a pretty comprehensive back office infrastructure that was entirely cloud-based and didn't have to reside on desktops and in-house servers. Fast forward, I don't know, about 4.5 years, and I was doing 5 churches then and a nonprofit at that point. And at the end of 2018, one of my clients, we were having lunch, and he said, "So what happens if you get hit by a bus?" So I went home and told my wife I didn't have a good answer for that one. So we felt like maybe we need to grow this just beyond myself. And so thus Auxilio was formed at the end of 2018. And so we've had the pleasure of bringing on just awesome people onto the team. I think we're up to 30 staff right now. And so God's been very gracious to us, but it's proven itself to be a good calling.
So, Kara, what services do you offer? You talk back office. So what kinds of things might that look like?
Yeah, we offer a comprehensive business operations. So we really want to provide the full suite of services. So what that includes is donation processing, all the finance, the bookkeeping, providing month-end reports, HRs. We will help you develop policies, employee handbooks, run payroll, look over job descriptions, any parts of that we can do remotely, we want to do on the church's behalf. Data infrastructure, so making sure all the platforms that a church is using work well together, very low friction, jump in when there's technology issues. And then the last piece is legal compliance, so making sure that a church gets set up properly and we maintain all those legal compliance pieces.
So if I want to get incorporated in any state, you're able to get the 501c3 all set and such?
So we work with a lawyer. So we farm that out to a lawyer. We work with a great guy, David Powers, down in North Carolina. We'd highly recommend him.
Great. Good. So now we've got some church planters here, but before we start talking to them, is that your bread and butter? Is that all you service? If I'm a particularized church, will you still talk to me?
Absolutely.
Oh, good. Because I'm lonely, because I don't have staff I can't hire it inside necessarily.
So right now we've got a total of about 75 clients, and of them about 55 are churches. About 1/3 of those are church plants.
Okay.
And we love working with church plants because we love to get in there right from the beginning and see everything set up right from the beginning in a way that can scale and grow as the church grows. But we do have about 30 clients that are churches that are about 1 million and below, and then the rest are above that, from 1 million. I think our largest client is about 3 million.
You are talking budget, not members, right?
Annual operating budget. Yeah.
Thank you, because I was really amazed at the churches you're working with.
1 million people.
Oh, that's good. That's good. Good. Yeah, I had an elder once whose love language was spreadsheets, and he reminded us quite often that your budget is your philosophy of ministry communicated in numbers.
Yes, that's it.
And so, what challenges do you see in working with pastors? Because it's not our field. We're not often, some are, but we're not usually motivated in that kind of a framework, but it is absolutely vital. What challenges do you see in building that bridge and getting them to understand you need to pay attention to this?
I think at least what I've seen, one of the reasons that when we first started Auxilio, we sort of gravitated toward the idea of going to church planters and looking at going to church planters is one, having been a small business entrepreneur, I really appreciate the fact that you've got to be a small business entrepreneur to be a church planter. I mean, you have to have that spirit. And when you have that, it means you also are of the approach that if I don't know how to do it, I can figure it out. Or I will do whatever I need to do to make this thing go. And so a lot of church planters basically sort of force themselves through the business side of the equation and the incorporation pieces and so forth, simply because they have to do it as part of getting off the ground. So I appreciate that fully, but it for me, it was from the standpoint of, if we can come alongside and take that off of a church planter and allow them to focus on the fundraising, on the outreach, on building a core group, then they have that benefit of not having to worry about learning that and spending the time on it. But secondly, we, as Kara said, we get to build the infrastructure from day one in a way that we know is going to scale with the church as, God willing, it grows. So,
yeah.
And Chris, just to pick up on that budget piece specifically. So we love helping churches develop budgets so that it can be a moment where we're being really strategic and we're thoughtful and planning, and then checking in on that throughout the year. You know, this was the plan at the beginning of the year. You said you wanted to spend $10,000 on community outreach, and that's not happening. You know, and that's a great encouragement then to remind the churches to get back to the mission that they originally set out when they put that plan down on paper. So a budget, you know, we always say it's not a prison, it's just a plan, but it's a good plan. And so we, you know, like to connect that directly to mission and remind the church throughout the year.
That's really helpful, because having been a church planter, having worked with church planters over 30 years, I find that we are, and maybe Chris could attest to this, not because he falls that category, but he has one. We're black Labrador puppies in a yard full of squirrels. You know, we're, because of the entrepreneurial aspect, we're chasing after everything, and have someone that, yeah, it's not authoritative, but just saying, this is what you said you wanted to do. Are you achieving that goal? And having that outside voice that's not an authority, or, you know, you're not in control, you're hired, but it's a great reminder.
Chris, one of the questions that was just put in here, do you assist with communications and have connections or recommendations for virtual administrative assistance? Relative to communications, we will offer some assistance, but one of the things that we recognize is you understand your context much better than we do. And so we may have some ideas to offer about things that we've seen other churches do. That's one of the benefits of us having a broad array of folks, is that we can say, hey, listen, here's something that we've seen exciting that somebody else has been doing. On the virtual assistant thing, to a large degree, we are fulfilling that responsibility of being a virtual assistant. So kind of a combination of those, I think.
Yeah, so what I'm hearing then is what you're offering fulfills a lot of what you'd be getting from a virtual assistant.
Yeah, the things that, as Kara said, anything that can be done remotely, then that's what we're about doing on your behalf.
Yeah.
Related to the business operations. So we're not handling scheduling for the pastors or you know, programmatic communications. We really want to encourage the church to handle that. But we will communicate with donors and even coach churches on how to talk about giving and help them formulate strategies for that. Okay.
So you're not going to be setting up, you know, what's going to be posted on my Twitter account with my favorite Tim Keller quote. That's you not don't want
your. Can I weigh in on that, Chris?
What was that?
Can I weigh in on that?
Yeah, please.
Just because I've talked a couple times with Keith about this, like that would be a huge need. Part of that is where I am, there's not necessarily a great pool of folks that I could get either within the church or within the community to help me with more of being like a administrator, not a business side, but communications and scheduling and hands-on things and intro church and intra-staff communication kind of things. And so recently I went on to the PCA Church Planners Facebook page and just said, hey, I'm looking for a part-time admin person. I was shocked. I got about 5 people who reached out to me. I'm in the process of responding to them and just trying to see if that's something that we could do, is have someone who's in St. Louis or in Nashville who would help us with the other things to be sort of a complement to what Auxilio does for us.
Yeah, no, that's great. So it's not an either or, those things can definitely work together because they're serving 2 important but different needs.
We at Trinity Grace, we've got a part-time administrative assistant, and she works in lockstep with the Auxilio team that's been assigned to us. And one of the great things, we've been with Auxilio for about a year now, and we came midstream. We had already planted our church. We were receiving support services through RUF at that time. And Auxilio came and basically onboarded us into their system and assigned us a team. And so our point of contact is very clear. It's two individuals named Mark and Jenny, and they have served us well. And they're very responsive. And they also interact with our admin assistant on the ground to accomplish the administrative tasks that we have as a church.
Great, good. Well, let's kind of fill out a bit more with Michael, Chris, and Steve. Take turns. Just tell us a bit more. Where you're at, what you're doing, and how Auxilio has been integrated and important in your work.
I met Keith at a church planners training, and all he said has come true. He sort of had a vision to do all the things church planters don't want to do. I would say I'm actually probably a little more administratively gifted than the average church planner, to the detriment of having the people skills I probably need. But maybe because of that, I really value the structure that they provide. Like he said, coming in from the beginning, we're a brand new church plant. We just started. So there's this opportunity to have our giving communicate to our database, which links up with our MailChimp account. So, it's all connected from the very beginning to help us out. And even though I felt comfortable doing some administrative things, I just probably underestimated how much was really involved with incorporating the church, finding insurance, doing stuff with a website and domain name, and all the reports that have to be filled out for the denomination, and payroll, and coming under the umbrella of our denomination. Like it was a lot. And so even though I could have done it, man, it would have been to the detriment to a lot of other important things to church planting. So again, even coming from a guy who could do some of that stuff on his own, it's been so valuable to have them come alongside and help.
What kind of time has it saved you? Because again, you're someone that could do it, wouldn't necessarily mind doing it, but what does that mean for you in what you're doing there in Colorado Springs?
It's probably a huge amount of time, because there's just such an unknown factor to all this. Like, where do you even start for incorporation? Who do you even contact for insurance? How do you even know which systems connect with what? Like, they've done so much work figuring out kind of the best platform to link our church to in the back end, that I didn't have to do any of that research too. So there's not only the execution part, but the knowledge base that I was able to kind of tap into. And again, it's just allowed me to focus on the things I'm supposed to be focusing on, like the people in our congregation. And so it's been a huge payoff.
And I would weigh in on what Steve said there a little bit. I've been with Auxilios for over 2 years now. And so I love the fact that they're willing to, you have a lot of confidence that they're building systems, but then they're not afraid to do something new if it'll either save money or be a better system. I've seen them make a couple of changes, but for me, there's no hiccup. It's just like, hey, Chris, we're rolling this out or making this shift. And so that's been pretty neat to see, is that they're not static in necessarily their systems. They've got some flexibility to change and make improvements. So,
yeah. And one of the things I'm hearing.
Jump in. I'm going to put an article in the chat. It's a blog from our website, and it's called "There's No Free Option," and it just goes through, the options for outsourcing and kind of lays out some of the arguments there if anyone has any interest.
Okay.
And then to Chris's point, one of the things that I think is a real value with Auxilio is that you don't just benefit from the team that we've assigned to your church. We're actually learning from all of our clients all the time. And our staff is sharing that information and learning from each other, and then bringing best practices and constantly honing those best practices, looking for the best tools. And so really all of our clients benefit from what the other clients have done or have learned, or what we've learned from them.
Mm-hmm. That's great. One of the things I'm hearing here that it just strikes me, and it's been conversations I've had through the years, all three of you are in, good networks. You got Rocky Mountain, the South Texas, Reach South Texas, Tennessee Valley. So there's a lot of good health in those places. But when a planter shows up, the questions are of the M&A committee. Okay, how do I do this? What do I do? And I'm getting questions like that all the time, from church planters. And if you're planting in a presbytery that there hasn't been a church plant for a while, and you're going to get old information, or someone just doesn't know, doesn't remember, that's one of I think the difficulties we have in our system, because you need someone to be able to tell you, especially as you're starting out the incorporation and beginning that process. That's an invaluable amount of information.
I could speak to that a little bit too, because we have one large PCA church in town that has done church plants, and they sort of absorb them financially. But our church was unfamiliar with church planting. We were going into new territory. And so they had a lot of the same questions I had, but like you've mentioned, as a church planter, I've been much more comfortable, like, I'll figure it out. And they didn't feel the same feeling. So when we could say, actually, we could do the finances separately, and you, mother church, who's a little nervous about this new work, you don't have to worry about this. Isn't going to mess your books up and your processes. We could start off totally independently. Your giving can just go directly to this new entity. It's made the whole process go so much smoother in a way that comforted everybody at the host church, the mother church, to let us kind of do this work. So,
Steve, that makes me think of the fact that when you're planting a church and trying to attract new people, trust and professionalism is an important aspect of what you're up to. And if people don't think or know that you're caring for their giving well, and accounting for it, it can be really detrimental. And one of the things that Auxilio has done for us has provided that face that allows folks to feel comfortable that our books are taken care of. It's done in a professional manner. Our I's are dotted, our T's are crossed, and it just builds that sense of comfort for folks to plug in and get even more involved.
There's so much in church planting where it's, hey, I have a friend. When it comes to this level of work, a friend is a good to keep a friend, but not jump in here and I'm taking it care of that. There's no free option. That kind of an idea. You look at things, if it's free, it's going to might have other issues to it as well. Deneen with Blevins with Parakaleo just said she's so thankful for your services. Our operations partners, Dana and Amy, are responsive and helpful. So we've gotten shout outs to Dana and Amy, and who were the other two that I heard?
And Jenny.
Yeah.
Hey, don't be leaving Aaron and Aaron Engstrom and Stewart out. They're awesome.
So again, and what I'm hearing is there's a team. So it's not, everything doesn't just fall on Keith's head to do all the work for me. Good.
Well, hey, I'm in a little bit different place than some of the other two planners are on here. I'm in a small town, 30,000 people, about 100,000 drive in on any given day. We're about 45 minutes outside downtown Knoxville. It's really 2 counties away. Knoxville feels in a lot of ways far, far away. I actually served in Knoxville for 11 years. And the thing that when I first, like Steve, met Keith at church planner training and then met with him again at General Assembly in Dallas to kind of seal the deal, the reason I was immediately attracted to him, Paul Hahn hired me at Redeemer to be the first administrator. And this was back in 2004. I had to figure out the websites. I had to figure out the budget. And I was basically the bookkeeper. I had to figure out the systems for getting money, counting money, reporting, everything, all the things that go in with incorporation and tax exemption and all that sort of stuff. And literally after about 5 years, I was exhausted from doing that job and frustrated. And I knew immediately that was the one thing about church planting I was most scared about in some ways, was having to deal with all of that. So when I met Keith, I literally knew right away, this is the person I'm hiring. And they're my first staff position. I think of them as a staff position, and I've never regretted it. It's been the best decision I've made right out of the gate, right when we started. So
One of the things that was attractive to us when we were looking for support services was obviously pricing, and the fact that we could afford it as a young church plant. And then also the fact that there's no contract here. There's a relationship for sure. But one of the things that was actually attractive about the Auxilio service option was they'll build an infrastructure for you. And when you get to the point that you can do it on your own or need to do it on your own or outgrow potentially what they offer, they pass the keys off, at least is how it's been told to us. We haven't yet had to do that, and I don't think we will for quite some time. But I love that idea that they're building something that we can take with us if and when this relationship needs to end.
Okay. No,
Let me, if I can build on that, actually, just a moment, Chris, is that it does speak to one of the ways that when we started Auxilio, we said we want to be, this is a high trust relationship. We understand that. And so one of the things that was important for us was that we build, first of all, only on publicly available platforms. We don't do anything proprietary because we didn't want to get into a situation where anybody felt like they were locked in to us.
Stop. Define that. What do you mean by proprietary? And
well, for instance, I mean, you could build a proprietary donor processing platform.
You're doing all the programming, you're writing.
Yeah, we're doing it.
Okay.
We do it all, right? But we wanted to do what we did entirely upon publicly available platforms. And to the degree that we get any kind of wholesale discount working with some of these guys, then great, we just pass that on to our clients. But if and when, as Michael said, if they decided, if Michael has a brother-in-law who's a CPA and retires and comes to town and says, hey, I'll do your business for free, that's a pretty good deal. So we want to be in a position where we can just turn the keys over and say, here's the logins to all the accounts. We establish an email address at each church, finance at, and that way all the communication history and everything is within their domain. So if somebody steps in after us, they've got all the history as well and know everything that's gone on before. So it was really important for us to build a transparent and open system in a way that each church had that freedom if at some point they either we somehow, were no longer the trusted partner and or they had a better deal in terms of somebody doing it for them, that we could just turn that over then.
Well, with that then, is this a la carte opportunity? Is it one, Auxilio comes in and you have this array of opportunities and it's kind of a one price for the whole thing, or is it a la carte?
No, we basically have a pretty simple pricing model, which is there's three things that are going to be part of it. One is there's going to be a setup cost that's based upon whether you're existing or brand new and what data transformation may need to take place. That's a one-time. Again, any software that we're able to get wholesale pricing on, we'll just pass along our cost to you as a church for that. And then for all of our services, which is comprehensive. So we don't offer a la carte services because we recognize, look, there's plenty of really good accounting and HR services available that if you only want pieces, then there's a lot of options for that. So our model is comprehensive, and that's basically 5% of your operating budget.
Okay. So okay, then, and that's the question everybody always wants to know. So what's the cost? So 5% of your operating budget is.
Yeah.
We like to really well when you're a small church, just getting started, and the pricing matches what we're setting out to do for the year with our budget. So that was an attractive piece for us, especially being brand new, really small, coming out of COVID. That made this possible.
Yeah, no, it's very, very attainable, because I don't think you'd see that in many other places where I was expecting more of a 10 to 13% cost.
Yeah, we like to say you get the, basically an executive pastor for the cost of an administrative assistant.
Mhm.
So that's
Yeah.
our hope.
Great. So the guys, can you give me some examples of how Auxilio has aided you and assisted you? It helps you do you better.
When we first moved here, the biggest question my wife had was, how are you going to get paid? Who's doing that?
That's a funny thing. We don't think about that, but our wives sometimes do. Yeah.
Oh, and so the first person I called was Keith. How do we get paid? Keith, back in the day, 2 years ago, was my guy. And about 6 months in, he had enough of me and pedaled me off to Aaron and to Stuart. But it was just, that was so important to my wife to know, like, how are you getting that first paycheck? And how does this work? And so just to say, well, you know what? I've got remote folks out of town. This is their job. We pay them to do that. It's going to happen. So
I'd imagine, I haven't done the work on this, but to try to figure out how much time Auxilio and these support services would save a pastor, you could probably quantify it half a day, a whole day, a week potentially, but then a lot of kind of emotional stress as well that is taken off your plate, which is a little bit intangible. But we have session meetings once a month, and our Auxilio team knows the date that those meetings are happening and make sure that they have the budget numbers in such a way that I can just print them off and take them to my elders and accomplish that portion of our session meeting once a month. Along with Chris, HR, we've got a few part-time employees at our church, and they take care of all the tax, pay, compensation. And then, of course, giving is a big deal. Obviously, it's the lifeblood of any of our ministries, and they make sure that is well tracked and get constant updates. And then the last thing I'll say is the Auxilio team, we've got kind of a strategic partner. Mark is the man who's been assigned to us, and he reaches out once a month to get on a Zoom call and not only check in on how things are going with the church and even me personally, but also offer some strategic insight and advice on certain things that were, like, for instance, we had a compensation discussion at the end of the year. Should we have COLA increases for our staff? Should there be raises? And he helped work through that with me and process in a strategic way, which was very helpful.
I'll ping off Michael there for just a moment and just I'm terrible with spreadsheets. It was amazing. I did that job with Redeemer for so many years. I just look cross-eyed when I see those columns and rows. And one of our provisional elders on our provisional session, a guy named Sam Smith, Michael might remember Sam. He's a business guy. He eats spreadsheets for breakfast. And so I just told my Auxilio guy, could one of my elders be on the monthly call? And so we do it as a 3-way Zoom call with each other. And just the fact that I have one of my session members gets to have that kind of access to Auxilio, he gets to hear his voice, see his face, ask any questions that he wants to ask. If Aaron doesn't have the answers right away, he gets them quickly. And just the confidence you have with that. And it's just been terrific to know that person is there who knows what they're doing and can get the answers and questions, especially with people that are holding you accountable and giving you oversight and trying to help you do the plan, like my elders.
To Kara's point earlier too about, them learning from us, it makes me realize how we're all doing very similar things all across the country. And so especially starting out, there was a million things we needed that maybe they didn't help with, but also had the connections for. So like she mentioned, having a lawyer to go to, having an insurance company that was vetted by them. They had somebody who could help us with the website. They pushed us off to somebody who they knew and could trust to do a good logo for us. So that's been super helpful for us too. And even like, coming from a church that was fairly established, had 30 years of doing finances the same way, to have some better solutions to the same problems that kept coming up. So with some of the new technology they're using, I'm able to issue temporary credit cards to like church members who are buying some, they're buying some supplies for some outreach activity we're doing. I can issue them temporary cards. It's like, that was always a problem, trying to figure out how to reimburse people, but there's solutions out there. And so they've been able to kind of say, okay, what are the pressure points for churches? And here's a way to either we've found a way to solve it, or here's somebody who we can connect you with to do it. So they're always my first call. Like, okay, here's the problem. What are other people doing?
Yeah.
Oh, we wanted to start an outreach called, it's a national organization. It's not overtly religious, but it's called F3, Faith, Fitness, and Fellowships, Workout for Men. And early in the morning, we wanted to start one here in Morristown. Me and another guy who just had an interest. He wasn't a part of our church. And so immediately we knew we needed a website. We needed an email, all those sorts of things. And called my Auxilio guy. They put us in touch with one of their tech guys. And literally, I mean, I in the past I've done this myself, and setting up a domain name, getting the email through like Google, all set up, would be an all day thing. And he had it done literally in an hour. It was incredible. So just to know, like, you need something done, it can happen. The responsiveness, the timeliness of it. So I just can't express like how much it just makes doing ministry so much easier.
Other thing I'll say too, guys, is, I mean, we are going to have to outsource this to somebody. And so we were looking around San Antonio, looking around at other options. I don't really know how I heard about Auxilio, but Keith, I'd be interested to hear you answer this question. It felt like it was kind of bubbling up in our denomination a little bit. And I was hearing about this service from other guys. And it does seem like it's grown over the past year or two, maybe exponentially, even in our circles. But the fact that Auxilio serves the church, and I remember when y'all onboarded me, Keith, you had me come to one of your staff meetings on Friday morning through Zoom, and you introduced the whole Auxilio team, and y'all prayed for me and got to know our context and our ministry. And that just wouldn't have happened with any other third party that we would have hired in San Antonio. I mean, they might have done a great job, but there's not that relational dynamic that you guys do a great job of cultivating among those that you serve.
Thanks, Michael. That's really our heart. I mean, we love the church, and God keeps bringing us amazing team members who also share that passion to serve the church. And so we really think of all of our clients as like part of the family, the Auxilio family. And so we love having clients come Fridays at staff meeting. We love getting updates about what God's doing in your church and in your context. We want to constantly be connecting the broader Auxilio staff to each client, so they have a sense of who everyone is and who we're praying for every week. You know, we pray for clients even on the weeks you don't join us for prayer. We're still lifting up prayers and take prayer requests all the time from clients. We love to pray. We feel like prayer is a big part of our calling, so it's really our pleasure.
Yeah, so Keith, what Michael was saying, Kara was talking about, tell us a little bit about the growth over the last 5 years or so.
Yeah, when we first started, this goes back to part of what Michael and Kara were both saying. You have to understand, my wife put up with a lot with me being a small business entrepreneur my whole life. And I had told her after I turned 65 that I wasn't going to start any more businesses. And of course, but now we know what happened with that promise. But the fact was that she actually got it real quickly and said, yeah, we need to do this. But one of the things that we said immediately was, all right, God, you seem to be making it pretty clear that we need to build a bigger boat, bring other people in, give this some legs. And from the outset, though, we said, we've got to just commit this to prayer. I need to do this in a sense differently than any other business I've done. And really, it's been committed to God in prayer from day one, in the sense that, Lord, I'm going to depend on you to bring the right people, and I'm going to depend on you to bring the clients. And it's just been I could spend another couple hours telling you stories of how God has acted and responded in that. But just to say that, as Michael was talking about, I think we've attended a total of like 3 church planting conferences, courtesy of COVID, and we've been to 2 general assemblies. That is the extent of any sort of, outside of the website, any marketing effort that we've actually done. It has literally been growth by referral, both on the staff side as well as on the client side. It's just been remarkable to watch. And so it's just, I really don't know how to explain it other than God's just helped bubble up our name. And people find out about us when they have a felt need. And it's just been a pretty amazing ride so far. So we're really excited about where it's going to go next. I mean, from April of 21 to December of this year, we effectively doubled. And so it's so we're interested to see where God's going to take this in the future. But it's basically all been referral.
Okay.
And we're expanding into other denominations now as well.
Okay.
So the Anglican churches, some Southern Baptist churches, Acts 29. Yeah, so that's been, exciting and interesting.
No, that's great. So to talk about, maybe Keith and Kara, a bit more about, and we talk about church planting. So what would it look like for an established church, or tell us a story of something you've seen that's happened that would be of interest?
In terms of just a church plant or an established church?
Of an established church.
Well,
because I'll tell you, my having gotten to know you over the years, because we've seen each other at church planting training when we've had those and those types of events. It's easy to think this is for a church plant, and I think it is. It's really great to start at the front end, working with something like with Auxilio, because you get it right to get-go. But a lot of, as we know, most churches don't have this. So let's say I'm a church, I've been around 12 years, and we've been puddling along.
Let me give you, so one of the more interesting examples we had was, again, when I was asked, what do you think, what's your bread and butter going to be? And 2 years ago, I said, churches that are below $1 million in revenue. That's probably our sweet spot. That's our bread and butter. But since COVID, it really has opened up a lot of churches to the idea of full outsourcing, no matter what size they are. And the interesting part, one of the interesting parts that relates a little bit to what Michael and Chris were talking about as well, is we had a church come to us that had outsourced their accounting. They had also outsourced their HR to another firm. So they had 2 outsourced operations going. But they were losing their executive pastor, who was taking the opportunity in COVID to move to the West Coast. And so they came to us and said, we'd like to talk about, I forget even how they heard about us, but they came to us and said, we'd like to talk to you. But what was really interesting was they said, we're looking for something very specific, because we have people who do the transaction work for us now, but we don't have a relationship. We don't have any strategic input. It's hard to get information. We need more than just transactions. But then at the same time, they said, but we need to be really high trust. And they recognized it right out of the gate that what they wanted was a high trust relationship, somebody who was going to be invested in their context and in their ministry, as well as doing the transactions. And that to me was sort of an encapsulation of what we're trying to be and recognize and think we need to be, which is our clients need to feel like we are really as invested in their ministry and in what they're doing. And we are, because we want to see the gospel go out in word and deed. And we get to be on the back end, help and support that vision that they have for taking the gospel out in their community. And that's what gets us excited in the morning and gets us excited. Now, one real quick story. You'll enjoy this. Somebody got the invitation for the webinar. They called us up and said, I want to talk to you before the webinar. And it turned out it's a pastor who basically has been doing the business administration of a church that he stepped into a couple of years ago, who lost their treasurer shortly thereafter. And he's been basically doing the work for the last couple of years. And he said, I'm tired. So various situations, right, that create the need or the felt need that brings different people to inquire.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, and especially for a planter who's going to be a bit more entrepreneurial, we have the Achilles heel of at least perceived self-sufficiency. We got to do it. It's all on my shoulders because no one else has done it, because I'm creating, and to be able to right from the get-go to recognize I just can't do it all, and I shouldn't do it all. It's not healthy. I like what you said too about the issue of trust, because that is part of it. Is we are, people are entrusting us with their tithes and offerings and the operation of the church, and then we bring someone in from the outside. We got to know that there is a degree of trustworthiness there, and to be able to have this kind of connection, I think really helps.
Tell you another one that was super helpful made my wife feel have all this confidence. The church in Atlanta, I had started a retirement account with RBI, with the PCA, our denomination. And in the move, I was a little nervous about my fundraising, and that I just decided I wouldn't want to pick up. It was in the budget to have my to have my retirement account pick back up. But I didn't really start it until about a year and a half in. And so that task of figuring all that out felt really daunting. Called my Auxilio guy. I had to do a couple little things to get him connected with RBI, get permission. But once that happened, he just made it happen. It was unbelievable. And figured out with my provisional session how to retroact some things if the dollars were there. And it just gave me a lot of confidence. Wow, these things that feel Herculean sometimes of a project to get done, and this isn't going to happen because I just don't know, one, if I have the energy or the time, and when I do, how quickly will it just sap me? And so it's actually made me want to, in some ways, address certain problems as they arise more quickly, because I know I've got a resource there, someone who's going to help almost hold my hand or do the work for me. So,
yeah.
I think one thing we can do and do for our clients is raise strategic questions. Like Michael mentioned, Social Security Administration just published cost of living increase of 5.9%. So we can take that and use that as a conversation starter. Is this a good time for your church to consider this? And sometimes that's easier to have an outside voice raise that question than for the pastor to have to go to their session and say, hey, how about a cost of living increase? So that's also, I think, one benefit that we bring to clients is raising strategic conversations at strategic times.
And we've also been utilized at strategic times to be the bad guy, to deliver the news, as it were.
Yeah, no. For those are listening in, attending, please shoot us any questions you might have, any things you'd like to hear. But at this point, I want to ask Michael. No, I'm sorry, Steve. Help me out here, Steve, not Michael, with the ministry to Afghanistan. So here you are you're at an early point in the church plant, and now you're taking on this ministry. How has Auxilio helped you with that? Tell us about the ministry, and then.
Yeah, we had so my wife and I were both active duty Air Force. She's from Colorado Springs, so we had a vision to plant here because it's such a military context. There's 5 bases here, and And that's what's happened. We have probably half our congregation has some connection to the military. So we launched in August when the U.S. was withdrawing from Afghanistan in August. And so there are a significant number of families who have a spouse who's been to Afghanistan. And so we had people reach out to us from Afghanistan for help. So our church responded and decided, let's do something to help. So we're sponsoring an Afghan family in town here. We're helping with some interpreter friends to evacuate the country. And as the country's sort of collapsing, we're helping feed families overseas. So we just, again, on a whim, got started on this thing. And I slowed down for a second when I realized my bank account started blocking transactions of sending money to Afghanistan and Pakistan. And so I reached out to Keith and our team right away and was like, keep me out of jail. what do I need to be thinking about? How do I need to be tracking this? What, how can we account for this? We did a massive amount of fundraising in like a 2-month period, like almost half of our annual budget. So managing that money and I don't think we could have responded as quickly we had, or even done it at all, if I didn't have somebody to call and say, help us do this right in a way that makes people comfortable, to Michael's point, where people are giving in a way that they feel comfortable to, where I'm not going to go to jail. And so having them in the background, knowing that support was there is really what made us be able to do it. So it's been an exciting ministry, and yeah, it gives me a lot of comfort to know. And that's not the only circumstance we've done something like that. We just, people are starting to commit to the church, starting to tithe, our music directors starting to put more hours in. So our temporary session, we decided, we should start to pay her. And they said, okay, Steve, you got the ball. And all I had to do was email Auxilio and say, hey, we need to hire a music person, for this amount. And they took care of everything. They onboarded her, HR stuff, they're paying her. After that one email, I didn't have to do anything. So there's been many circumstances, but the Afghan one has been pretty significant, where we've just been able to reach right out and say, help us do this.
Yeah, to be able to pivot that fast, especially for a 5-6 month old church plant is amazing. And I guess now Auxilio has a new tagline: Auxilio partners keeping pastors out of jail since 2017 or whatever. All part of it. Yeah. Well, great. Again, looking for any other questions and such, or any other stories that you guys have been seeing. Steve posted up there the waypoints thing for the Afghan supports to see what that is, but that's, to be able to move that fast and respond and have something together, the amount of hours it would take, and it's important doing it, but you're always trading hours. To do that is not to do something else, and to do something that you can offboard onto another organization. Nick asked the question here: how do we take the next steps? Consultation to assess needs, more details and services, etc. So Keith, Kara, what would you say? What are the next steps for those who are listening? What would you encourage them to do, and what would it look like moving forward?
Sure. Well, we'd love to talk to you, and you can set that up pretty easily if you go to our website. I'll put it in the chat. And there we have a let's get started form, and it's really simple. It's basically name and email and maybe your church name. And then from there, we'll get in touch with you and set up a time to talk, maybe a 30-minute conversation to learn more about your church and context, and to explain more about Auxilio services. And most of the guys mentioned this, but there is that emotional burden of not knowing what you don't know. And I think Auxilio loves to come alongside churches and kind of bring an ease to that, and just say, we don't want you to worry about it. We've got it. We've got a team of 30 people. If I don't know, Keith might know. If Keith doesn't know, Mark's going to know. And so we'll take on that emotional burden for the church.
Good.
So I got one other story, and everyone has different thoughts about this, I'm sure, in terms of like when COVID hit and there was all this talk about like the government helping folks stay in business. And so I would have never even known as a church planner where to go with that. And so just to know that Auxilio had their finger on the pulse of and down in the weeds of the PPP loan and what that was like and what was involved with that, and any questions you had about that or wanted to pursue it. So that was just a huge, like, I would have been, I just wouldn't have even known where to start. I wouldn't even tried. And so it's just great knowing that you have someone who has access to and knowledge and experience through the years to know how to navigate those kind of things, which evidently was pretty tricky, but evidently Keith didn't lose any other hair over it. I might have turned a little more gray, but figured it out. And, it was a real blessing to our church to have someone help us think through that process and that resource.
Oh, that's great. That's great. Yeah. Being able to get things like that to the people that need it the most. There's a lot of organizations and businesses were able to get it because they have a full team on a multi-million-dollar company that can do it. In churches, we just don't have that. So to be able to have Auxilio really helps a lot. Well, thank you so much. Really appreciate your time. And those of you who've been listening in, you'll be getting a follow-up email with a link to this. So you can pass that on to anyone else who might be interested, as well as the contact information of both Keith and Kara, as well as Chris, Michael, and Steve. If you have any further questions, to be able to follow up with that. Well, we'll be having another conversation next week. We'll be doing several in a row over the next couple of weeks. We'll be talking about transitions in ministry and how to handle that and how to be coached through transitions. Because chances are, if you're a pastor, one time or another, you'll probably be transitioning from one position to another. And so having that information helps. We'll also be talking with weeks to come, Robert Kim at Covenant Seminary about church planting, as well as Dean Faulkner at RTS Charlotte about each of their programs on different weeks, how training church planters. Many other options and opportunities, so be looking for those emails. And we are so grateful for you being with us. And until the next time, join us then. Lord bless.